2 days to note. Tomorrow morning at 8
o'clock, if you're has declined to COVID-19, and shockingly, 30% of people with major depression don't respond to the current medications that are available. This is why I am delighted to have my next guest on the program. He is Ronan Levy. He is founder and executive chairman of Field Trip, and he's going to talk about psychedelic therapy.
Who cannot work from home, and First Nations, Inuit, and Métis individuals can book an appointment on Thursday.
So apparently,
said all residents
a deal has not been reached to release British prisoners from Iran or something.
You can find the list of hotspot postal codes at 680news.com. Michelle Morton. Toronto Public Health says it's investigating a possible COVID-19 outbreak at one of the federal government's designated quarantine hotels. The Crown
Therapy, you'll probably hear me actually refer to it as psychedelic assisted therapy or psychedelic assisted psychotherapy.
Is the focus of the investigation. The Associate Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Benita Dubé, says Toronto Public Health is assigned staff to initiate an investigation and to work with the facility to identify all cases and review and advise on all of public health measures and infection prevention and control measures. Now, TPH hasn't said how many people may be infected with the virus or how the outbreak began. Under the Quarantine Act, people traveling into Canada on an international flight are supposed to stay in a government-authorized hotel while waiting on the results of a COVID-19 test taken shortly after landing. Anyone who
where you too can get COVID-19. Isn't that wonderful?
Up to $3,000.
And as COVID-19 case numbers in Ontario are trending in the right direction, a sudden vaccine supply shortage due to reallocation is forcing the closure of 3 clinics in York Region. 680's Michelle Mackey reports.
Ontario is reporting 3,732 new cases, up slightly from Saturday, but the 8th straight day that number has been more than 4,000. The record high ICU numbers remain. 895 people are in ICUs across the province. 615 of them are on ventilators. Locally, there are 1,198 new cases in Toronto, 797
I could have swore they just gave us different numbers 10 minutes
in
ago.
York Region. More mass vaccination clinics at Canada's Wonderland, Georgina Ice Palace, and Richmond Green are shutting their doors Monday due to a lack of supply. A move the region's medical officer of health calls unfair.
So we, New York Region, feel that we haven't really had our proper share of that.
This guy sound like a cartoon character.
Dr. Kareem Kurji is calling on the province to increase supply from 50,000 to 80,000 doses per week by mid-May. I'm Michelle Mackey.
Canada is expecting 2 million doses of the Pfizer shot from the
the air
US in the
ambulance
upcoming days. This all comes as Ontario has achieved a vaccination milestone, reaching its goal of 40% of eligible residents in the province having
approaches to therapy, but it usually takes a long time, months or years in conventional approaches where people can
the province, starting with the most vulnerable populations. Mayor John Tory says right here in the city, 40% of eligible Torontonians have also received their first shot.
I want you to know that we will not rest until everyone has received their first vaccination, everyone has received their second vaccination, we get the lockdown lifted in between, and we truly put this pandemic behind us.
Here in the GTA, in the meantime, pop-up clinics are opening their doors in hotspot communities.
Depending on where you are in the GTA, you might have seen a special paid sick days message flying across the sky over the past couple of days. This comes as UNIFOR reveals the results of a strike vote earlier today. 680's Julie Arumasi joins us with the details.
UNIFOR announced Sunday morning that Orange Air paramedics have voted around 94% in favor of strike action. But the union's president, Jerry Diaz, says they plan to keep negotiating with the province to waiver Bill 124.
We're expecting this entire process to be completed within the next couple of weeks. So we're giving ample time for the Premier to do the right thing.
UNIFOR has been flying a plane over the GTA with a banner saying paid sick days now, while raising awareness for this fight against Bill 124, which caps public sector wage increases to only 1% a year.
The grocery store workers, the hospital workers, workers of long-term care facilities, the paramedics, those people have done so much to keep us all alive, keep us fed. So now, talk is cheap.
This bill has been in effect for the past 2 years. I'm Julia Rumasi.
To Quebec now, where COVID-19 cases are holding steady, but it looks like some restrictions are being eased.
Starting tomorrow, elementary students in the Quebec City region will return to class. Schools were closed throughout the month of April. The nighttime curfew in Montreal and neighboring Laval is also moving from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. This follows about 2 weeks of stable COVID-19 cases and a slow decline in hospitalizations. Also starting tomorrow, Quebecers aged 45 and up will be able to book their vaccine appointments as the province gradually widens access to the general population in descending order of age. Blake Lambert, the Canadian Press. And the CBC is reporting that Proud Boys Canada, a far-right group that Ottawa named a terrorist entity earlier this year, has dissolved itself, saying it has done nothing wrong. In February, Canada said the group posed an active security threat and played a pivotal role in the deadly attack on the United States Capitol in January by supporters of
where Capitol Hill police officer died of a heart attack.
Of the official Proud Boys channel on Telegram says, the truth is, we were never terrorists or a white supremacy group. We are electricians, carpenters, financial advisors, mechanics, etc. More than that, we are fathers, brothers, uncles, and sons.
We are everywhere.
In 2016, the Proud Boys began as an organization protesting political correctness and perceived constraints on masculinity in the United States and Canada, and grew into a group that embraced street fighting. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair said in February that the domestic intelligence forces had become increasingly worried about the group.
That is the best synopsis ever.
Check gas prices.
680 News Time, 11:39.
We all know family and friends have been recommending Capital Direct for years, and now with the advent of FlexiLine or a traditional equity loan, your options are even better compared to the banks.
Are much less, the benefits much more sustained.
Where the shrooms at, dog?
And the overall experience much more pleasant than conventional antidepressants.
So it's just the ketamine that's approved by Health Canada currently?
Chocolate chips.
That's correct. The Minister of Health has granted
white people need permission from the government to eat
from the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act for people with end-of-life distress to access psilocybin-assisted therapy. So on a one-off basis, some people are getting access, but right now ketamine is the only option that's broadly available to people.
Okay, and I know that there have been some psychedelic clinical trials being run in Vancouver. What is Canada's role in shaping the psychedelic therapy industry?
Supplying the world?
So Canada actually was very active early on in the research in the 50s and the 60s. In fact, it was a Canadian, in fact, he was from the UK, but he was living in Saskatchewan, who coined the term psychedelic in the first place.
Really?
But more recently, Canada has actually become the epicenter for the emergence of this new psychedelic industry, whereas most of the research took place in the US or the UK because Canada has built a very healthy, robust financial and capital markets industry for the cannabis industry. A lot of the pieces that were needed to put in place to build the psychedelic industry were here already. So most of the major companies leading the psychedelic renaissance are actually coming out of Canada, or at least are situated in Canada through the Canadian Securities Exchange, which is where we're currently publicly listed, or the Toronto Stock Exchange.
And so I gather there is good potential for the psychedelics category in Canada and the world, perhaps?
Absolutely. If we're talking about it from a financial perspective, I think it's one of the most significant opportunities we're facing right now, because right now, just in the U.S. alone, I don't have the Canadian statistics, but in the U.S. alone, they spend close to $250 billion per year trying to treat mental health issues like depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And we can see by the results that it's not working. So you're targeting a very large industry. Globally, it's estimated that the global economy loses $8 trillion a year from lost productivity to depression and anxiety. So, beyond the humanitarian impacts, I think everybody knows someone who suffered with depression or anxiety or other mental health challenges or eating disorders. It's another area of a lot of interest. Beyond the humanitarian considerations of these therapies just being much more effective and much more meaningful than current approaches. The economic impact is absolutely profound as well.
It's
an incredibly exciting industry to be in, and from a number of different perspectives.
It certainly sounds it. We're going to go to break, and I'd like you to hang on the line if you don't mind, because I want to talk to you a little bit further about the types of patients that would qualify for this, and kind of get into some of their stories and some of their health outcomes as well, and why it's important during this pandemic. So thanks so much for hanging on the line. I'm Maureen McGrath. You're listening to the Sunday Night Health Show on the Chorus Radio Network.
I found a fortune cookie. It's still wrapped in plastic because it's made of plastic. You are gifted with artistic talents, Panda Express. Just for that, I'm never going to Panda Express ever. I swear to God.
Still to come on 680 News, we'll do a rundown of your top stories, followed by sports. 680 News time, 11:43.
If the kitchen is the...
So you're going to run 2 straight minutes of commercials. Okay, I'll bring it. Oh. That is an intense pain.
Here and far, I got you got love. You that star, how now it look disgusting. Me a man that war, now them know they're running. Now this superstar, hey, you know they're all going to a big car. Cause every time I step out, big star. You know I'm fixing my big jobs. Cause every time I step, get on a bar. Brother, I'm all fixing my big job. Cause every time I...
It's 11 degrees and partly cloudy right now in downtown Toronto. Good evening, I'm Veronica Thor. Here are the top stories this hour. Starting tomorrow morning, more Ontarians are eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine. If you're 18 or older living in one of the province's 114 hotspots, you'll be able to book an appointment. York Region's top doctor calling on the Ford government to ramp up the region's supply of vaccines. It comes as the clinics at Canada's Wonderland, Georgina Ice Palace, and Richmond Green have been forced to close their doors on Monday because of the shortage. And coming up after sports,
a strain of bacteria found under a German garbage heap could help us solve our plastic waste problem. This Week in Science, coming up.
680 News time, 11:45.
So I don't think the mic picks it up. But Buddy's up in the cage rustling all his papers. You can hear the music, you can smell the weed. He knows it's time. He can make all the noise he wants.
Kingfish will hold me from Mars. Oh, yeah, my nigga. We run all day. Hey, we run full blaze. Better than the men that we don't play. Hey, I'd speed on the freeway while I dig with but nothing near and far. You got to get blushing. You that star, how now it look disgusting. Me a man that war, now them know they're running. Now this superstar, hey, you know I'm always a big car. Cause every time I step out, big star. You know I'm fixing my big jobs. Cause every time I step, get on a bar. Brother, I'm always a big job. Cause every time I step out, big star. Kingfish will hold me from Mars. Oh, yeah, my nigga. Yo, I love the vibes of my city. Everybody, I love my city, I love my city.
Two-stroke victory at the Insperity Invitational. I guess to take home a $2.25 million prize. Sports at 15 and 45 past every hour or anytime at sportsnet.ca/590.
License 10349.
Northwood Mortgage. People don't usually sing about their mortgage, but at Northwood Mortgage they do. They sing about lower rates. They sing about greater cash flow. They sing because we help them. You could be singing about your mortgage too. Come on, try it with us. Boy, oh boy, do we do Christmas lights. There you go. Call or visit us today at northwoodmortgage.com.
We're working harder for you.
When you donate your unwanted vehicle to Kidney Car, all proceeds stay in Canada. That means your spring cleaning could be helping people.
Not if it was a Japanese car.
Programs and services right here at home. Contact Kidney Car today and arrange your free no-contact tow. Plus, receive a tax receipt for the fair market value of your vehicle. Kidney Car, helping Canadians help each other for over 27 years. Donate at kidneycar.ca.
In the midst of a monstrous surge of COVID-19 infections, the Indian government has opened vaccinations to all adults in hopes of taming the spread.
Despite being the world's largest maker of vaccines, the country is still short of critical supplies due to slow manufacturing and the lack of raw materials. New Delhi resident Sakshi Kumar was relieved to be getting her vaccine.
We already had COVID, so now I think this will be a good thing so that we don't get infected again.
India's states and federal governments are expected to take on the task of immunizing 900 million Indian adults, as the price of private vaccinations proves too high for the majority of the population. Meanwhile, the UK
How many
government said
rupees
it will
was it
send
again?
an
We
additional
covered that. I know
1,000
we covered
ventilators
that.
to India, and Britain's national health system is creating an advisory group to share its expertise with Indian authorities. I'm Karen Chamas.
Pyongyang has given a warning to the United States.
After President Biden called North Korea a security threat during his address to Congress, North Korea is threatening that the U.S. will face a, quote, very grave situation and that the country intends to continue advancing its nuclear program. The White House says it's aiming to hit a middle ground between former President Trump's goal of striking a deal with the country and former President Obama's strategic patience. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to ABC News.
Rather than all for all or nothing for nothing, a more calibrated, practical, measured approach.
Mark Remillard, ABC News.
Millions of tons of plastic waste enter the world's oceans and landfills each year, and even if we could catch it all, it's a lot of it is tough to recycle. But as 680's Curtis Doring reports, something found under a trash heap in Germany could be a solution.
You know what they're going to release? Methane. So you're still going to end up burning it.
Polyurethane, shoes, bedding, car parts, fridges, spandex. It's very useful stuff. The problem
it's not.
is that most of these
Polyurethane's
plastics
horrible.
don't melt when you heat them up, making them too difficult or energy intensive to recycle or
You
destroy.
gotta burn it.
So a lot of it just ends up at the dump where it leaches out a number of toxic chemicals, some of which cause cancer. But it turns out there's a creature that actually eats this stuff, a strain of Pseudomonas bacteria just recently discovered at a plastic waste site near the German city of Leipzig. This bacterium is able to take some of the chemical components of polyurethane and use them as a sole source of carbon, nitrogen, and energy. While exciting, this won't solve our plastic waste problem by itself, and it could be a decade before we start putting it to good use. In the short term, our best option is to drastically reduce the amount of plastic we use and throw away. With This Week in Science, I'm Curtis Doring.
Wait a second. You didn't tell us about the bacteria at all.
Traffic and your extended forecast. 680 News Time, 11:50.
If it eats plastic, is going to still off-gas some type of methane or something equivalent. We have renewable natural gas runs our garbage trucks here, supposedly, in Toronto. Tell us about where the mushrooms at.
Research on psychedelics was used in the context of addiction and substance abuse disorders. So there may be some contraindications there, tend to be fairly limited. If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, then ketamine may not be appropriate because it can elevate blood pressure. And people who may have certain breathing issues, again, because even though when you have the ketamine experience, you're not unconscious, it can slow your breathing a little bit, and so it may not be appropriate. But outside of those fairly narrow contraindications, I guess certainly also pregnancy and nursing is also a contraindication where we don't provide it. But outside of those narrow indications, it is something that's probably safe and appropriate for many people, although the guidance, at least in Ontario, restricts us to only treating people with treatment-resistant mental health conditions.
Okay, and is it conscious sedation, basically?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, people are very lucid and conscious. I mean, the way it is delivered is you provide people with noise-canceling headphones. They put on eye shades, and they're really invited to go inwards, because that's really where, and I hate to use this term in the context of a scientific medical treatment, but that's really where the magic happens, is when people go inwards and reflect on their lives and their experiences. But they are very much conscious. They are very much lucid. They can continue to have a conversation with the therapist present if needed.
Sitting on the damn sidewalk.
So far as sedation, it's a sub-anesthetic dose with ketamine, but you definitely are in an altered or non-ordinary state of consciousness, as it's usually described.
So it really has the potential to redefine mental health treatment. I mean, up till now, we've had, and you know, they've been a tremendous help for a lot of people, SSRIs, but as you say, they come with a lot of side effects. There's antidepressant withdrawal syndrome. They don't work for a lot of people. You know, when you say people have to go inward, is that generally depression syndrome that is a result of perhaps trauma as a child, or situational depression, or is it for somebody who is experiencing anxiety and depression during perimenopause or menopause?
It can be all of those. You know, we work with patients who are just treatment-resistant depression. No clear indication of trauma, although I do think all of us experience trauma to some degree. I think that's just part of life. We've dealt with military veterans who have experienced firsthand extreme traumas.
That's totally different.
You know, it really is across the spectrum. The invitation to go inward, I think, is just truthfully, that's just the way it's done. It's the way where the research lies, because I think what happens, and at least the understanding right now of why psychedelic assisted therapies are so effective, is because two things seem to happen. One is they are rapid acting antidepressants, because they typically flood the system with serotonin. People feel a lift within 30 minutes or so of being administered the drug, so you get a quick lift. People are able to go back and revisit, and sometimes it's not, you know, revisiting past trauma. Sometimes it's just connecting two dots that you haven't connected before. Sometimes it's just having a degree of objectivity to see something from a different light. Sometimes things from your subconscious that you've never clued into before having an impact on you come to light, and you see it that way. You know, you have that emotional processing starting. And then the third piece, and this is where the integration part comes in and becomes very important, is that with most psychedelics, there's actually a period of neuroplasticity that follows the experience. So your mind becomes much more malleable, in a way similar to how children are much more adept at adopting new skills or new languages, because their mental models aren't as rigid as adults. Following a psychedelic experience, people's mental models are more malleable. And so more conventional cognitive behavioral therapy techniques like motivational interviewing or behavioral activation can actually help people change the thought patterns that they have. So if it's a question of, you know, just changing the thought channels that you're using, or getting more exercise, or eating better, or waking up early, or all of these things that support a healthy mental health attitude or framework, can actually be implemented and adopted much more easily than someone who hasn't had a psychedelic experience. So you kind of match all three of those experiences together. That's why it seems to be that these experiences.
And that's the problem with mental health experts. They in the hospital 26 days, what'd they feed me? Sugar, nothing, fucking no proper ventilation, refusing to acknowledge I got sickle cell. When I tell the woman I'm dying, you know, oh, I'm more concerned about your mental health than your physical health. Really? That goes completely against Hippocratic Oath and basic medicine. That's retarded.
Cause every time the the big star. King says what will make for us. All of my niggas, the minister when we run all day. Hey, we run full blaze. Better to the men that we not play. Hey, I stay down the freeway while I dig with the nothing near and far. You got to get bloodshed. You that star, how the whip look disgusting. Me a man Jack Bar, now them know the running down this superstar. Hey, brother, I'm up like a big car. The devil is a big star. You know I'm fixing my big shots. The devil is a bar. Brother, I'm up like a big shot. The devil is a big star. King says what only for us. All of my niggas. All of my city. Been sitting, thinking, he was really real now. Having visions of other niggas taking views now. I'm gonna drop on the niggas when they steal out. Ain't no time to wheel out, just pop up and peel out. From boxes to bursts, hard way, soft lines who will flip it first. I got a pump that defines the purpose of gravity. One shot of fly, you kicking back to reality. But wait, let me snap back to reality. Had to make 9 out of 5, no salaries. Been in some shootouts, the next side miss me. Niggas talk beef until I turn that to mince meat. Niggas think they got it cause that place that they lived in. You never put a penny in that pot that you dipped in. How you say you eat with your niggas and break bread. Break what? Put your face to the curb and I break necks. Only sell bling, one twin will break heads. And one white shot for the pump will break legs. 1 9 copper top bullet will take life. And 3 pulls off my PK will take flights. Yup, but nothing like Air Canada. Remember when my mama caught me in my room bagging up, and I knew that selling drugs was nothing I should brag about. But you should know that when I touch the road, I bring my magnum out. 5 shots for these 5 haters. By hater, you could hide now, but you gon' die later. You skip the snub, fine player. It's real hot, and they don't show no love for that non-take shit. I'm floating on the clouds, something like my mind Nimbus. You with this, my niggas move balls, no timidness. I'm still here on my 7-5 rich shit. 6 over 5 in my semi-auto 5th clip. That's around I get pissed quick. See the right flash, then my whole damn wrist flicks. Big bitch, tell me if you really with this. Oh, you a snitch, so I think you the witness. Jeezy dumb been on this gun shit.
Starting 8 a.m. today, the province is adding 114 postal codes to the list of those eligible for a vaccine.
3 clinics in York Region are set to close their doors today. The region's top doctor says it's due to an unfair vaccine rollout.
Ontario and the city of Toronto hit a major vaccine milestone over the weekend.
Toronto Public Health is investigating a possible COVID-19 outbreak at a quarantine hotel.
Raptors with a gutsy effort here in the second half against the Lakers. The Blue Jays sweep the
Opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says Kenny is doing it to avoid criticism and to keep his fractured caucus from collapsing.
This premier has locked the people out of their own legislature at a time when they are likely looking more than ever to that very building and the people running the government inside of it for leadership.
Alberta has close to 23,000 active cases of the novel coronavirus, the highest total since the pandemic began. Getty's cabinet will continue to meet virtually. Quebec COVID-19 cases are holding steady as some restrictions are being eased on Monday.
Elementary students in the Quebec City region will return to class. Schools were closed throughout the month of April. The nighttime curfew in Montreal and neighboring Laval is also moving from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. This follows about 2 weeks of stable COVID-19 cases and a slow decline in hospitalizations. Quebecers aged 45 and up will be able to book their vaccine appointments as the province gradually widens access to the general population in descending order of age. Blake Lambert, The Canadian Press.
To national news, the federal Conservatives are taking aim at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's top aide.
The Tories tabled a motion for the Prime Minister to dismiss his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford. It came after another of the Prime Minister's advisors suggested Telford knew about the allegation against General Jonathan Vance 3 years ago. That motion is one of three that the Tories can choose to go to a vote in the House of Commons on Tuesday. The Commons Defense Committee is preparing to resume debate over whether to call Telford to testify. Trudeau last week defended Telford. Blake Lambert, the Canadian Press.
Advocates are calling on the federal government to address anti-black racism in the public service. The Public Service Alliance of Canada says the issue is widespread and there are limited opportunities for career growth or advancement for black employees. Public Service of Canada Vice President Norma Domi says she's the first black executive in the Institute's 100-year history.
This is a false narrative.
In the U.S., prosecutors are asking a judge to give Derek Chauvin a penalty that's more severe than what state guidelines call for when he's sentenced in June for George Floyd's death. Reporter Mark Remillard has more.
Prosecutors have filed a memo with 5 reasons why they say Derek Chauvin should be given an aggravated sentence for the murder of George Floyd. They say Floyd was particularly vulnerable given that he was handcuffed and on the ground. They say the treatment of Floyd was particularly cruel. They say Derek Chauvin abused his position of authority as he was in uniform at the time. They say he committed the crime as part of a group. And finally, that the crime was committed in the presence of children. All of these factors, they say, warrant a stiffer sentence.
Chauvin was convicted of murder and manslaughter. SpaceX has delivered 4 astronauts back to Earth, marking the first U.S. crew splashdown in darkness since the Apollo 8 moonshot. Reporter Gio Benitez has more.
Splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico.
We welcome you back to Planet Earth, and thanks for flying SpaceX.
Infrared cameras capturing the daring nighttime water landing of the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience. 4 astronauts on board, ending that historic nearly 6-month mission to the International Space Station.
Managers switched to a pre-dawn splashdown to take advantage of calm weather. In sports, no Canadian teams in action in the NHL. The lone game had Tampa Bay over Detroit 2-1. In baseball, the Blue Jays finished their sweep of the Atlanta Braves, doing so in style with a 7-2 win. And on the court, the Toronto Raptors now lead the LA Lakers 101-87 early in the fourth quarter. From the Global News Desk, I'm Toby Kerr.
You got questions? She's got answers. The nurse is in for Nurse Talk.
Welcome to the second hour of the Sunday Night Health Show.
Dr. Kareem Kurji says he's asking the province to increase the region's supply by mid-May.
At 680 News Time, 12:05. There's rain in the forecast for much of the GTA this morning. Our weather specialist Denise Andriachi says we could also see some isolated thunderstorm activity.
Some scattered light showers throughout the morning. Temperatures are cooler throughout the afternoon. We'll see on and off periods of rain through the afternoon and evening. We could see about 10 to 15 millimeters of rain.
Denise said they'll be isolated and localized, but it will be a good idea to keep the umbrella handy. And with the rain comes some cooler temperatures today. Daytime highs will be below seasonal, only getting near to 11 degrees. But it'll warm up a bit on Tuesday with temperatures approaching 16 degrees.
You're listening to All News Radio 680 News. NDP leader Andrea Horwath is one of many local officials who say the Ford government's paid sick day program is not enough. Horwath is set to renew the fight for 2 weeks of paid sick days later today.
And we're going to hear about it 10,000 more times. So apparently there's a rumor that they made a deal to get back some hostages from Iran, but it's not true. It's a rumor. So I don't know why they don't want to tell me about it twice.
Is heart palpitations. Now, women heart disease is the leading killer of
thinking he was really real now. Having visions of other niggas taking pills now. I'm gonna die for the niggas when they steal out. Ain't no time to wheel out, just pop up and peel out. From oxys to first, hard white soft lines who will snip it first. I got a pump that defines the purpose to gravity. One shot of fire, you kicking back to reality. But wait, let me snap back to reality. Had to make 9 out of 5, no salaries. Been in some shootouts and next side miss me. Niggas talk beef until I turn. It's that evil streets remix. Onyx, featuring Method Man. Word up. The New York Times. Oh, my people. Got one like to live.
Welcome to Big Ma Matters, a podcast about Big Ma people,
Fuck. There's almost 400 songs on this playlist.
Sometimes I feel alone, sometimes I feel at home.
Canadian.
Rooney. Don't sleep, don't sleep. I'm going in. Toes volume 3. I'm going in. Don't sleep.
When the jump rise and it don't go well, you should revive because they leave no shells. If I use the Uzi, then they all fell. Track creeping, they getting smoked to the stairwell. Like I know that these dudes have it. I got a muscle cut like Dukes of Hazzard. You know I move through traffic. Welcome home parties when they touching down, but now it's like NASCAR. This nigga better buckle down. I took the pictures of the frames and then took my words out of context and couldn't explain what's talking. I guess it's monkey says, monkey do. Till I close their eyes with Gorilla Glue. Give a fuck who had the better verse. They shutting down shows and shutting the streets with the heckler. I swear to God, we get to drive. We leave you right where you stand when an X marks the spot. Like I'm killed for the cocoa. I live for the cocoa. I'm shotty gonna live from room and sit by the sofa. My Jewish links the kosher. I'm the East Coast to kill a white shark and stuff.
The following day, groups of men gathered in front of the cafes and hotels in Dawson City, speaking in guarded tones. No one paid any attention to Kenny, leaning casually against the wall, his parka hood thrown back at the risk of freezing his ears.
Yeah, Pete. The man is from Alaska. You seen his dog? Yeah, Pete. I bet K-Rad's dog can eat him up in 2 seconds.
Companies that have tried to make what you might see as a moral, ethical, human rights stand, and then immediately suffer business blowback. Now, you've written a whole book about this, about the awkwardness of trying to navigate those eggshells and those sensibilities.
Everything's dry.
So this is, yeah, shall we go singing after work? So here's...
For the statement just made. We have just heard the last speaker on the list for this morning. However, the Assembly will continue to hear the pre-recorded statements in the spillover event immediately following this segment.
Oh wow, everything just... I'll get it. You work from home 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. How come everything on the weekend has to suck? Those are all the same damn song. It's the same damn song. What have you done?
Quer que esteja, e venha daí também a sua mensagem, se quiser, através da nossa linha WhatsApp 912-120-501, mas vou já começar.
The monitors that are coming that are easy to wear, and it's usually worth finding out what your symptoms are from, what your heart is doing when you get symptoms, so we can sort of make sure it's nothing serious.
Of course, we have a caller on the line, Catherine from Surrey, British Columbia. Good evening, Catherine.
Hi. I have been taking magnesium for several years, and it's really helped me. So I just wanted your take on magnesium.
And how has it helped you, Catherine, if you don't mind?
We were talking about ketamine.
If I come in contact
how do we go from ketamine to magnesium? No, seriously.
Because I have MCS, chemical sensitivities, my heart will race, and then the doctor said I have an extra heartbeat. So it feels like I'm on a swing. It's a really...
Yeah, doctors in Canada are notorious
for joining us. Christopher Fenton, the author of Feeding the Dragon, what he describes in his memoir as the $1 trillion dilemma.
Recap your top stories and sports. 680 News Time, 12:13.
Somewhere in here, they're talking about a book, Fighting for Democracy. Some Canadian who has something to do with the Spanish Civil War, but they won't repeat that one 10 times. This is good. Please keep freezing up and knocking up. That's hilarious. It's hilarious when people think they're smart. You download software off the dark web to harass people, and you think of yourself highly intelligent and a hacker. You're not.
And Quaker Puffed Rice. They're never sold in... Now to continue our story. In spite of the cold, perspiration broke out on Kenny's young face. He had learned about the dogfight. He knew the facts that Sergeant Preston needed, but he couldn't leave his hiding place behind the crate that held the big dog named Killer.
Still with. All right. Bye-bye, Mama. Africa Eye asked him to wear a hidden camera for his next meeting with Angela Etta, the official at the Calabar Pension Office. During the meeting, Angela Etta implied he should make an extra payment on top of the 21,000 naira, about $55, Obanji claims to have already paid her.
Then I got this place right. Nothing when you go to right, you must drop something.
Obanji does what he's expected to do and hands over some money.
Yeah, let me see what I have here. 5. Okay. For the shrine. All right. Thank you very much.
But even then, the pension payments don't begin. And having to pay someone to get the pension you're legally entitled to isn't the only problem facing retired people in Nigeria. I'm in Okile, which is a community in Yala, where last October, this list was published with over 300 names of people declared dead, and as a result, their pension payments stopped, including this man. Good afternoon, Mr. Cletus. So your name is Mr. Efuka Cletus Laffin?
Yeah.
And that's your name here? So your name here is on this list, sir, that says that you are dead. That's the list.
I'm not dead, madam.
I can see that you're alive. The problem with ghost pensioners is a national problem. Adding of fictitious names to the payroll is one of the ways that money is stolen from government funds and can lead to a shortfall in money to pay pensioners. In 2019, 400 billion naira was owed to pensioners. Jerry Uwa is a finance and business journalist familiar with the problem of pension fraud.
What happens is that somebody will add names of non-existent pensioners. That one goes to him. The people at the top. It's not something at the grassroots. The people at the top, they will pay those ghost pensioners immediately. and the money goes into their pockets. It's not something that a clerk can do because it will be discovered. It's right up there.
Last November, pensioners tired and frustrated by delays to vet them and reinstate their pensions protested outside the pension office of the Auditor General, Mrs. Franca Enoch, in Calabar.
Registered our grievances. Yes. The whole world is aware of what is happening today. Yes.
Retired nurse Epeyong Ewa was involved in the protest and is still angry at how the pensioners were treated.
The attitude, no respect given to them, no honor given to them. They are being treated as beggars on the street for their own civil rights.
Following this investigation, journalist Obaji Akpet's mother, Margaret Akpet, began receiving her pension. Efika Cletus still has not been paid and has no idea when or if he ever will. We put the findings of this Africa Eye investigation to Mrs. Angela Etta and Mrs. Franca Enoch and asked for their comments. They have not responded.
Yemisi Adegoke there, who was travelling to Cross River State to meet those ghost pensioners. We're going to be catching up with Yemisi later on the programme here on Newsday.
It's 18 minutes past the hour now to sport. Top story, a game that never happened. James Craig.
Yeah, it was a remarkable day yesterday, Lawrence, for many reasons. Thousands of people gathered outside Old Trafford to protest against Manchester United's involvement in that collapsed European Super League. You may remember from a few weeks ago, but around 200 supporters were actually able to enter the stadium a couple of hours before the scheduled kickoff against Liverpool. It meant that their game against Liverpool was postponed. Had Liverpool won that match, had it gone ahead, Manchester City would have been the Premier League champions. Champagne stays on ice then for them in actual Premier League action that did take place. A Gareth Bale hat-trick helped Tottenham beat Sheffield United 4-0 and move up to 5th in the table. Arsenal won 2-0 at Newcastle. Inter Milan have won their first.
Yes, it is. They're to be, wary of. And, when we said before the break that you generally want to know what when you feel palpitations, you want to know what your heart is doing. Atrial fibrillation is a big part of that. It's a common heart arrhythmia. So the top part of your heart, which is called the atria, it fibrillates, so it wiggles. It doesn't squeeze properly. And then the bottom portion of your heart, the ventricles, they go faster than normal and they beat irregularly. So you feel an irregular pulse. And you can feel like your heart is skipping. The most important or the most serious consequence, because the top part of your heart isn't squeezing anymore, blood sits there, and when blood sits in some place, it can form a clot. So atrial fibrillation is a big risk factor for stroke. So when I hear somebody and they say that they're feeling palpitations or their heart racing, we want to make sure that that's not the cause, because if it is, it may need treatment. It often needs a blood thinner to avoid the risk of stroke, and it may need other treatment. And atrial fibrillation for both men and women does become more common with age. We do see an increase around and just after the time of menopause in women, again, possibly related to that withdrawal of estrogen that women experience as they go through menopause.
Right. Another thing that's very common is weight gain. Estrogen affects where women store fat and also how it is burned. So when patients come into your clinical practice, especially in a time of COVID, and they are overweight, perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, is that part of the treatment plan? We know that menopause can cause the metabolism to slow, and that can also contribute to weight gain, and that would put stress on one's heart and increase or worsen increase the risk or worsen somebody's heart disease. So what would you recommend to women at menopause who are suffering with weight gain?
So yeah, it's definitely an important thing to be aware of, and weight gain certainly is a concern. Of course, we know it has many, being overweight has many adverse effects on our health, and the heart is one of them. The heart has to work harder. It increases the chance of atrial fibrillation. And so you do want to be mindful of your weight. And around menopause, I like to sort of recommend to women that it's a good time to sort of take stock of their heart health, so to know their weight and their other numbers like cholesterol and blood pressure and stuff like that. And then if patients are noticing their weight starting to increase, which is, of course, common with COVID because people aren't going outside as much or doing as much activity as before in many cases. It's important then to have some sort of exercise program. A good minimum for people, if they're not very active now, is to aim for 150 minutes. So 2.5 hours per week of moderate intensity exercise. So that's things like walking or gardening or doing yard work. It has to be at least sort of 10 minutes at a time to keep your heart rate elevated for you to get the benefits. So that's a good rule of thumb for most people. More is better. So if you want to be really good, you aim for 300 minutes a week, but 150 is a good place to start. And again, more strenuous, you get more benefits. If you are going to run or something, that's better. But again, if for people that are sort of maybe not getting enough activity, 150 minutes a week in intervals of 10 minutes or more is a good place to start. So regular exercise, and then, starting to pay attention, if you haven't before, to your diet. If you see the scale starting to increase, that's sort of a sign that now you really got to take stock of, how many extra calories are you eating? Do you need a drink with dinner every night? Are you sneaking anything? Is there anything you can sort of reform to be a little bit more healthy without stressing out too much? But it's a good way to, it's a good sort of wake up call that you should be reviewing your diet. And so that's sort of the two-sided approach that I would start with for a lot of patients.
And a couple of other symptoms I want to mention. One is swelling of the feet, and the other is difficulty lying flat. So, maybe it's a symptom of fluid pooling in your lungs. What can these be the result of?
Yeah, so the big one that you want to make sure that you don't have any of those symptoms is heart failure, where your heart doesn't squeeze well enough and pump blood as efficiently as it should, so fluid backs up. So because the heart's kind of like a pump that takes blood from the veins, and it has to pump it forward through the arteries to the organs that need it. So if the pump doesn't work as well, the fluid doesn't move as well as it should be. So the trouble breathing when you lie down occurs because you've got a little bit of fluid at the bottom of your lungs, and then if you lie down, the fluid redistributes and it makes it harder for you to breathe. That is potentially more concerning. If you have that, you should definitely check in with your doctor. There are other causes, so it doesn't automatically mean you have heart disease, but it's worth checking that over. Swelling of the ankles is more common, and it can just occur because our veins in our legs, they dilate and they swell, and they allow blood to leak into the surrounding tissue. That is much less serious. That often occurs as we grow older. Some medications can also cause that, but again, if it's especially if it's a new symptom, it's worth having that reviewed by your doctor to make sure that it isn't something more serious with your heart that would need treatment.
And I'm glad to hear you're talking about exercise because, correct me if I'm wrong, those women who exercise tend not to get high blood pressure as frequently as those who do not exercise?
That's right. It's a tremendously effective, intervention. I don't, some doctors will write it like as a prescription. You must do this because they think it convinces the patient more to have it in their hand. I'm not sure. I don't do that, but I certainly tell them, you could take a medication, but it's probably better, and it is better for you overall because exercise has so many other benefits outside of the heart. But it's better to start with exercise first, and that may be enough that you don't need to go on medication. So it makes a huge difference to stay active, and it has a strong effect in reducing blood pressure for both men and women.
Awesome information, Dr. Weisler, as usual. And I think you have underscored the fact that heart disease in menopause is preventable with all of your great suggestions.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming on the program. We will get you back for sure. All right, coming up next, we are going to get down and dirty in the Back to the Bedroom segment. So do you ever fantasize about talking dirty to your lovers? You'll be surprised what the research says. I am Maureen McGrath. You're listening to the Sunday Night Health Show on the Chorus Radio Network.
I'm going to sneeze within 2 meters of you with no mask on. No, wait, that was the wrong one to click on.
We can adjourn. I think there's no question that...
potentially fatal issue. So what needs to change? Why is there no database tracking the movement of all these officers?
We think there are a couple different explanations. So one important reason just may be that they lack information. Some agencies simply don't know they're hiring a wandering officer, either because the officer didn't report it in their application, the agency didn't do a background check, or maybe the background check was ineffective. You'd think we'd have solved this problem by now by creating a database, but very, very few states in the US collect data to track information about police firing. The other thing is that, the lack of information isn't the whole story. There have been a number of cases where agencies have knowingly hired wandering officers, and in fact, Tim Lohman is an example of that. Tim Lohman, who killed Tamir Rice, later got hired by another department before public protest put a stop to it. And that was after he became a national name. And there are a couple of reasons why agencies might knowingly hire wandering officers. They might sympathize with the officer, thinking they got a bad shape. They might discount the social costs of hiring a bad cop because police are largely insulated from legal liability in the US. Or they might actually want to hire a wandering officer. They might want to hire a kind of cowboy cop. That may be exactly what they're looking for.
There seems to be so many issues to deal with there. There's the warrior policing aspect of policing in America, which has become increasingly aggressive and militarized. There's a lack of liability, you mentioned. If something bad happens, police officers may get greater protection in the law, which lots of people would say is not right. What are the fundamentals that need to change here?
There are many roadblocks to police accountability here in the United States, but I think a few jump to the top of my mind. We've mostly been talking about wandering officers who've been fired. But the vast majority of police misconduct is committed by officers who have never been fired and never will. And one reason is that it's hard to fire cops in the United States.
Well, there we are. He's done an in-depth report into these wandering police officers in the US. Ben Grunwald there, a professor at Duke's University School of Law. He says it's the legal liability is difficult to actually prosecute police officers, and it's RoboCop as well. It's this increasingly aggressive level of policing, militarization of policing in the US, which many forces want to hire. Police officers can move around, and nobody knows where they are. This is Newsday, BBC World Service.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the United States is made possible.
Truck from 1-800-GOT-JUMP arrives at your house.
It's a sign of a new beginning.
A clean start.
A breath of fresh air.
When your home feels clean and happy,
the people inside feel clean and happy too.
We make junk disappear.
All you have to do is point.
Call 1-800-GOT-JUMP
or visit us at 1-800-GOTJUMP.com.
Do you suffer from congestion, sneezing, and itchy eyes in late summer to early fall? Clienta Research is conducting a ragweed allergy study with compensation up to $2,675. Ask about the referral program. Visit at clienta.com.
Alpine Credits.
You're the approved guy, right? I say I own my home, you say...
Approved.
Love that. I'm looking to combine my credit card bills into one simple payment. I own my home.
Yeah, approved.
Next question. Can you babysit my kids? I own my home.
The World Service, Lawrence Pollard and Claire McDonald with you.
Today, hundreds of women across Nigeria are reporting sexual abuse in a surge that appears to be connected with the pandemic.
Zambia calls for minimum wages to be given to all, but can business afford to?
We're looking at why Nigeria is suffering food shortages of the most basic items, potatoes in particular.
Potatoes.
BBC News with Neil Nunes. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has accused China of acting more aggressively abroad and more
and older starting Thursday, as well as to those with high-risk health conditions.
Was not trying to hold China down, but would not allow it to undermine what he called the
to return to class Monday after being online for all of April. The nighttime curfew in Montreal and neighboring Laval is also
for the shortage of COVID jabs. Adar Poonawalla said the government did not place any large orders with his company until March, when the second wave of the pandemic had already hit the country. Meanwhile, India's Supreme Court has told the government to ensure that Delhi gets the oxygen supplies it needs by the end of Monday. Since April, dozens of people with COVID-19 have died due to a lack of oxygen. French children are returning to classes in schools as part of the government's plan to lift its third COVID lockdown.
Convicted of sexually assaulting a comrade's wife. And in international news, Pyongyang has given a warning to the United States after the American president called North Korea a security threat.
After President Biden called North Korea a security threat during his address to Congress, North Korea is threatening that the U.S. will face a quote.
Elections in June against a background of regular street protests over the unemployment rate of 15%, soaring prices, and food shortages. Italy has announced details of the plan to build a new floor in the Colosseum, the Roman arena that's one of the world's most popular tourist attractions. The floor will consist of rotating wooden slats that'll enable visitors to stand once again at the same level where gladiators fought in the amphitheater in Rome.
Why would you ever want to be in that same position?
Bedroom segment. I think everyone's in bed by now. What do you think? Across the country. For sure. They're sleeping in Toronto.
You can book your vaccine appointment at a mass immunization clinic. That's the number of new postal codes that will be eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine as of 8 a.m. this morning. The province says of the 114 hotspot areas, Toronto, Peel, and York region are seeing the highest number of postal codes selected. To find out if your postal code has been added to the list, you can head over to our website, 680news.com. Now, if you are eligible to book your appointment, just head on over to the provincial booking portal.
And that's not the only update in the vaccine rollout. On Thursday, no matter where you live, those 50 years and older in 2021 across the province can book their shots. And also on Thursday, residents with high-risk health conditions, such as those who can't work from home, including remaining school workers and First Nation, Inuit, and Métis individuals, can book an appointment as well as priority populations who've only been able to book through the call center. Now they're able to book online. The province has projected
that just shows they don't experience this word in their entire education.
And Ontario reached an encouraging COVID-19 milestone this weekend. The province says over 4.8 million people have received their first shot. This comes as we're expecting more Pfizer doses to arrive from the U.S. in the coming days. And as of April 30th, over 5.2 million doses have been administered across Ontario, serving the most vulnerable communities. For good news, 40% of Torontonians have also received their first dose. Mayor John Tory says the city must now work ahead to the next milestone.
That's where we have to focus, on moving that 40% number up as quickly as we can and starting to focus on second doses.
Ramping up that vaccine momentum, the Humber River Hospital will be running a pop-up clinic this week, starting today until Wednesday, May 5th. This clinic will be for eligible residents 18 years of age and older, living in the 12 identified postal codes. For a full list of those postal codes, head to our website, 680news.com.
680 News time, 12:35. Pressure is mounting in New York region after several mass vaccination clinics are closing today due to a shortage of shots in the region. This comes as ICU numbers remained at record highs. And with 895 people in ICU, 615 of them on ventilators. More than half of cases stem from Toronto, Peel, and York region, where mass vaccination clinics at Canada's Wonderland, Georgina Ice Palace, and Richmond Green are closing for 24 hours. This due to what the region's top doctor calls an unfair shortage.
Hotspot determinations by the timetable have been about 25% faulty. So a quarter of the doses, certainly in York region, will be misdirected.
Dr. Kareem Kurji is calling on the province to increase doses to the region by mid-May to prevent these rolling closures.
You're listening to All News Radio 680 News. Whip out the umbrella before you leave the house. There's rain in the forecast for much of the GTA this morning. Our weather specialist Denise Andriacci warning some rain is on the way, and we could even see some isolated thunderstorm activity. Denise says this spring weather is anything but consistent.
We have bouts of rain. We've got bouts of some cooler air as well. There's no consistent temperature trend over the next 5 to 7 days. So don't put that spring coat away just yet. I know we're in May, but we will hover on average below seasonal for the next week.
And you may want to put on your rain boots too, as she says the rain could accumulate from 10 to 15 millimeters. And with the rain and isolated thunderstorms, the daytime high will only be near 11 degrees today. 680 News Time, 12:36. At Queen's Park, official opposition NDP leader Andrea Horwath will hold a virtual press conference demanding that the Ford government provide 14 paid sick days to protect frontline workers. She's fighting to extend the paid sick days because they would prevent workers from more sickness and death while also aiding in.
So the story we just clipped off the beginning of here, the guy in charge of, oh my God, this is one thing after another with military sexual misconduct. I don't know who's in charge of the army. Some tells me the highest ranking officer who's got a clear reputation doesn't realize they're in charge.
Laws already existing, but they're simply not being applied,
really?
Or would you like to see new measures brought in?
I think a little bit of both. I must say that the state of emergency that was declared is the first time this has ever been done. And so that's certainly a step in the right direction. I mean, our laws that do exist, unfortunately, many of our amended laws haven't been adopted by all states in Nigeria.
Right.
A popular one that we speak of is the Violence Against People's Prohibition Act, which is the law that we as civil societies would like to see adopted across all states in the country. So there's a cohesion of the law. And as you said, the implementation by law enforcement, I mean, that's something, again, that we'd like to see so we can see better conviction rates.
But when so I mean, I mentioned in the introduction, Kemi, that you know, if you want to go to court to get justice, it can take forever. Is there any way of kind of cutting that knot, of punching through that, of sort of maybe making it even a separate section of the penal code, sort of having courts dedicated to dealing with these with this kind of behavior?
Well, actually, we do have. I mean, Lagos, for instance, we do have sexual offense courts specially assigned.
And are they any better, any more efficient than the regular ones?
I must say, again, when you do a comparative study between states, Lagos is significantly better because of these implemented courts. So yes, indeed, if they do exist, they certainly make a difference.
Well, that would seem to be a good idea. Is there any movement to roll that out at other states' levels? And is there more broadly a difference between, you know, you mentioned Lagos, sort of less developed?
If any road agents would have much use for this mining machinery.
So it seems like many men and many women are totally into sounds during sex. And, you know, we can thank Hollywood for that, I am sure. But the most appealing sounds differ for men and women. There's also dirty talk fantasies, and if you want to contribute to this conversation, feel free. The number to call is 1-877-399-90.
I'm thinking gunshots, police sirens.
This huge increase under the pandemic of violence against women in Nigeria. Thank you to Kemi.
We say BBC World Service. Labour Day, the annual holiday to celebrate workers' rights, was marked all over the world on Saturday. There were riots in Paris in support of social injustice and against changes to unemployment benefits.
In support of social
in Zambia,
injustice.
The President, Eka Lungu,
which a lot of people are into. And women report more BDSM fantasies in general than men.
Yeah,
so this is perhaps, you know, in part why women had the most frequent dirty talk fantasies. I'm sure you guys are out there like shocked that this that women are fantasizing more. But, you know, women don't often say everything. They don't share everything. We do have a few secrets. And also, dirty talk fantasies were associated with several sex-seeking personality traits, like erotophilia, for example. And so that's kind of how you respond to sexual advances. It would be, you know, it's a trait which assesses an individual's disposition to respond to sexual cues, not necessarily sexual advances, but more sexual cues in either a positive or a negative manner. And it's measured on a continuous scale. So you might be making, you know, sexual advances towards somebody or flirting with somebody, and they may or may not get it. And you're like, what's the deal here? Well, they may be very low on the erotophilia scale. Dirty talk fantasies are associated with sexual sensation
So they don't get
seeking.
it.
So
There's someone with
those
them,
people
not
who
you.
are
Hold
going
on.
after sexual sensation. So those who have more positive attitudes about sex or saw sex and emotion as separate, being able to be separated, and enjoyed, more of an exciting or adventurous, thrilling sexual encounter, definitely reported more interest in dirty talk. So in some ways, the appeal of dirty talk says something about how we feel about and think about sex in general. So kind of the more comfortable you are with it,
He's dragging this out.
A month of compensation. I do think that most of the industries could absorb this type of increase at that level.
Yeah, it doesn't sound really very much when you put it in that context, does it? Now, I know clearly the world over, industry has been impacted by coronavirus, but you found a different way of selling your product, haven't you, during the last year? Tell us more.
Claire, this is pretty, to be honest, I've been in the industry, I think 17 years now, and I would not have believed this when my team came to me. So there's a local Afra delivery. It's like Uber Eats for most of us in the West. And Afra Delivery, they've got about 250,000 customers here in Zambia, and they deliver food. It's an e-commerce application. It's quite successful. And we approached them last year that, would they be interested in considering delivering cement? So a bag of cement is 50 kgs. It's a large item. And they said, well, Jim, it's a well-established business. We'd be willing to give it a shot. And you can't believe it, but it's been about a year. We are now delivering 30,000 bags of cement a month through this Afra Delivery, which is this Uber Eats application.
And that's not going on the back of a motorbike, is it? I mean, that sounds like quite a big delivery. But how are you actually delivering it?
So I have to admit, I have seen before cement bags be delivered on bicycles even. However, in this case, of course, we ensure all the safety standards are there, and large 5-ton trucks are being used. But the cool thing is you can get cement delivered in 90 minutes in Zambia now in most larger cities.
If you have money.
Well, that's fantastic adaptation to the current crisis we're in. It's been wonderful talking to you, Jimmy. Thank you so much for coming on Newsday. Jimmy Khan, CEO of Lafarge Zambia, producing cement in Zambia for 72 years and now delivering it to your door if you should need some.
16 minutes today. I'm trying to think of what I could be using cement for. I need fertilizer rather than cement at the moment. My asparagus are looking a bit weedy. Right, it's 16 minutes to the hour. This is Newsday. James standing by with the sport. Also, we'll find out about why the price of potatoes has gone up. Not the price of fish, the price of potatoes in Algeria. And they grow a lot of them. So what's the problem? But first, we go to...
English is her second language. So this.
Let's speak to our chairman. That's so cute.
Slow rate of vaccine procurement and rollout only received their first dose. Many.
Sure, it can be very frustrating, and also, it's helpful for women to relax during sex. But if it's too tight down there, it can also be that it's been 10 years or 15 years without any estrogen, and so the introitus, or the opening to the vagina, can actually get smaller, and so she may actually need vaginal dilators as well. But it would be a good idea for her to have an exam just to see. But it is likely the result of vaginal dryness and maybe an atrophy of the tissues. So vaginal dilators, hormone-free personal moisturizer, maybe, and I'm not giving medical advice here, but for some women who have this, these are options for them to look at and even talk to with their doctor. And so also there can be, anyway, I'm not sure what area, you're in the Vancouver area, lots of people here who can examine her, and just to make sure, to provide the exact correct treatment.
I've talked with her and put the radio on her station,
And the reason her English is not very well is because she listens to Chinese news and reads Chinese only. So,
well, that's another relationship issue.
Yeah. Oh, so you don't cover that in that? Okay, I understand. I thought was there's a
treatment, and they said, why are we even bothering? None of our wives even want to have sex with us. It's either painful or they have low sexual desire. Very, very common issues, you know, at midlife and beyond for lots of couples. So sex is very important in a relationship. It's the tie that binds. And, you know, there's also great risk if people don't get the treatment that they need so that they can enjoy a good health.